History of Dark Age, Season 3, Episode 16, Foundations of the Fractured Dawn. Prologue. Embers in the dust, 3 years after the fall of the last rebellion. The lands of the Dark Age no longer echo solely with war drums. They murmur with hammers, trade routes, and the scent of new ambitions. The Scarlet Kingdoms are awake, hungering not for blood, or so they claim, but for dominion over what remains. Across the frostbound Vein Coast, surveyors and alchemists map the newly thawed marshes where leviathans once slept beneath ice. In the charred spires, smoke carries the clang of molten forges building the first bastion markets. Half fortress, half trading cathedral. Farmers till lands, blackened by pyromantic wars. Hunters chart forests, where ghosts still linger. Merchants, once smugglers and spies, claim legitimacy under banners woven anew. And amidst this fragile rebuilding, something stirs. The rush for forgotten grounds. Old treaties are rescribed, old lines redrawn, and in every court, a whisper: he who builds now, rules later. Chapter 1. The Dawn Market of Ashmere. The morning mist clung to the spires of Ashmere, a rebuilt trade city upon the borders of House Veltharn. Gold ember banners swayed as traders laid out their wares: phoenix oil, obsidian blades, and fire ferns wrapped in silk cages. Here, Lord Kael Dravine, a merchant turned noble by the Ashgard Council, had founded the first hunting guild of the Emberlands, a company sanctioned to reclaim haunted hunting grounds and tame the wild drakes for sport and trade. 3 years of peace, Kael muttered, adjusting his flame-stitched cloak. And peace is merely war, with softer teeth. Around him, his retainers discussed the new charter. Ember wolves to be culled, not slain. Breeding pairs sold to southern courts. Volcanic terraces converted into game fields, at a price steep enough to make the Ashgard richer than kings. Chapter 2. The Founders' Bastion High. Upon the cliffs of Stormrain Coast, engineers and masons worked under House Kael rune banners. They were building the first bastion of the reclaimed dawn, a massive stronghold meant to guard the new trade arteries between east and west. The bastion's great hall smelled of wet stone, ink, and ambition. Sabrine Kael herself oversaw the council, merchants from the floating cities, ironclad hunters from the Scarlands, and displaced nobles seeking new seats of influence. A bastion is more than a wall, Sabrine declared. It is a promise, and promises bind nations better than blades. Contracts were signed with molten wax. Territories were mapped on stretched vellum, each inch of land representing a clan's future, or its slow starvation. Chapter 3. The Hunted Frostmarrow Vale. Far to the north, where the Frostmarrow Vale still whispered of ancient curses, nobles and mercenaries gathered for the first great hunt of the Dawn Era. The quarry, a silver-antlered marrow stag, said to grant visions of prosperity if slain with a blade forged of true star iron. Among the hunters, Thalios Valon, revenant heir of the drowned court, wrapped in barnacled mail. Evelyn Veltharn, now called the Ember Duchess, whose fire drake prowled the frosty pines, and a company of unnamed cell swords with masks of bone and gilded steel. The hunt became a theater. Alliances are whispered over campfires, assassins' contracts signed in the snow, and rumors of a hidden bastion beneath a veil spreading like ash on the wind. Chapter 4. Markets, masks, and marriage bargains. In High Spire Crown Hold, House Erendor moved like a spider in winter, silently, precisely. The Ruby Prince Thres prepared a marriage festival disguised as a merchant's conclave, inviting both rivals and allies. Veiled hands watched it from the mirrored balconies. Oriana's relic throne pulsed beneath crimson silks. A wedding is a contract, murmured the Crimson Nun, her voice thick with honey and venom. And a contract is the first step to war. Here, territories were auctioned in secret. Hunting rights, mining rights, even the service of memory scribes, who could alter birthrights and erase debts. Chapter 5. The New Bloodlines. As peace stretched thin, new families began to rise, born not of ancient blood, but of coin, cunning, and opportunity. House Dravane, alchemists of the Saltmarsh Wastes, offered brinefire munitions for every bastion built. Guild of the Silent Banner, mercenaries turned peacekeepers, claimed hunting tithes from 3 regions without a single drop of noble blood. Order of the Verdant Moor, a cult-turned harvesting syndicate, offered exotic beasts and blood wine from the jungles, and among them, whispers of a man with blackwater hair and glacier blue eyes. Viserion, the warlord of Manticores, circulated one more. For every new wall built, there was an old scar waiting to be torn open. Chapter 6. The bond beneath the ember trees. Night in Ashmere smelled of ember wine and rain-slick cobblestones. Beneath the canopy of glowing ember trees, Evelyn Velthorn walked with Thalios Phalon, their breath misting in the late autumn air. They were rivals by bloodline. Fire and tide rarely danced, but tonight the hunt's aftermath had softened the air. Peace is a fragile thing, Thalios murmured, his barnacle-clad gauntlet brushing her fingers. Yet, it feels more dangerous than war ever did. Evelyn paused, her flame-hued eyes reflecting the branches above. Could 2 heirs of opposing currents bind their houses through desire alone? The Ash God would never allow it, nor the drowned court, but the ember trees whispered otherwise. A soft kiss beneath their branches sealed not a promise, but a possibility. Chapter 7. The loom of courtly schemes. In High Spire Crown Hold, preparations for the great wedding of Lord Kael Dravain's daughter, Serenia, began. The Union promised to merge House Dravain's mercantile empire with the influence of House Erendor, yet beneath silks and banners, alliances shifted like serpents in velvet. Oriana's relic throne thrummed with approval. Marriages were the quietest wars, and she adored silent weapons. Among the guests, whispers already began. What of the Velthorn heir? What of the drowned court's envoy? Every dance step on the marble floors carried the weight of an unspoken betrayal. Chapter 8. The Huntress and the Ghost-Forged Blade. Viserion, the shadow of a coming storm, had arrived uninvited to the edges of the festivities. His hair black as black water, his glacier eyes unreadable. He watched Evelyn from the balustrade. His presence alone stilled the air. The blade at his side, a relic forged from the lost ore of Nixarion, a metal that drank starlight, was a gift for a bride he did not name. His manticore circled in the hills beyond. Restless, in the moonlit garden, Evelyn found him alone. "Do you still dream of conquest?" she asked. "I dream of a world where dreams are not owned," he replied. Chapter 9. Soul Marks in Shadow. As the wedding torches burned, the ritual of soul mark binding was invoked, a rare and ancient ceremony in which 2 souls could entwine their essence, becoming true soulmates. Serenia Dravain and her chosen groom, Dareth Erendor, stood before the hall. But the ceremony faltered. The runes flared, dimmed, and then a second name appeared on the soul mark. Not Dareth's, it was Viserion's. Gasps filled the hall. Serenia's face turned pale. Her breath caught. Viserion was no groom. He was a shadow of war, a name cursed by courts, but fate itself had tied her to him. Chapter 8. The Broken Feast. The wedding feast turned into a masquerade of smiles and daggers. House Erendor's emissaries whispered of betrayal. House Dravain demanded answers. Evelyn watched from the high table, her fingers cold around her goblet. Viserion did not stay to explain. With 3 of his blades sworn and the manticore waiting in the stables, he vanished into the mist before dawn, leaving the hall in uproar. "He stole not her body," murmured one courtier, "but her destiny." The next morning ravens flew to the far corners of the fractured world. Some called it abduction, others called it prophecy fulfilled. A few whispered it was the first spark of the coming unification, or the next great war. Chapter 11. The Septon of Silent Threads. In the heart of High Spire Crown Hold, as the embers of scandal still glowed, a new figure arrived. Septon Merin Vaith, known in whispers as the Keeper of Threads. He was no ordinary priest. His robe was woven from moon-silver threads, his staff crowned with a crystal eye that shimmered faintly with unseen constellations. The faith he preached was older than the crimson web, older than the Rubaiyat laws, the Weaver's Testament, a belief that all faiths were once part of a single tapestry, torn apart by greed, and that only through binding hearts could the threads be restored. Merin moved like a shadowed reed among storm waters. His sermons were not loud, but whispered into courtyards, gardens, and the sleeping ears of nobles. And yet, already, invisible gatherings met at dusk. Lords' daughters, disgraced knights, merchants with hollowed eyes. They crave meaning. He told his acolyte, a meaning is a seed. We were planted where hearts are cracked. Chapter 12, Ember and Tide. Meanwhile, in the charred spires, Evelyn Veltharn and Thalios Valon shared a private council. The scandal of the soul marking had shaken alliances, but in their isolation something far more delicate was blooming. Trust. They met beneath the obsidian arches, their fingers entwined like embers meeting tidewater. You still believe in these gods of thread and weaving? Evelina asked, brushing the damp salt strands from his hair. I believe in currents, Thalios replied, and some currents carry us not to war, but to each other. Their bond became a secret vow, a romance not yet flesh, but already whispered among their closest guards. Chapter 13, A Prayer for the Unseen Septon. Myron stood in the rain-soaked plaza of the old citadel ruins, his followers cloaked and masked. His sermon tonight was not for the masses, but for the invisible faithful, those who believed the weaver's loom could still be mended. He spoke of a prince born under the eclipsed moon, a union that had been stolen, and a kingdom that must choose, not with swords, but with vows. The gods do not war as we do. They weave. Each choice is a thread. Each heart is a knot. Tie them well, and the world will hold among the crowd. Evelyn's spy listened. So did one of Oriana's crimson agents. Chapter 14. The veil between love and war. Thalios and Evelyn received a letter sealed with a silver thread sigil. The Septon requested their presence at the Chapel of Quiet Rain, a place where no oath could be broken without the sky itself crying in protest. There the Septon spoke softly of a coming tide, vassals stirring, faith awakening, and a marriage that might either heal or divide the fractured lands. Your love, he said, eyes glinting beneath the hood, is not yours alone. It is a banner. Choose how it will fly. That night, beneath storm-churned skies, Evelina lay awake, the scent of Thalios still on her skin, the Septon's words in her veins like poison and prophecy alike. Chapter 15. The Feast of Silent Rain. The Hall of Ether. Zar restored was draped with banners of phoenix and tide. Nobles from Veltharn, Valon, and distant Erindor came under the guise of peace, but beneath the music of glass harps and honeyed wines, spies traded glances like coins. The Septon Merin sat quietly near the dais, his fingers tracing the grooves in his staff, as if each line was a thread he could pull. Evangeline Veltharn toasted alliances. Thalios Valon whispered in her ear, the romance still, an ember hidden in ash. Oriana's emissary, cloaked in ruby silk, slipped from table to table, sowing doubt like thorns beneath the linen. Peace, murmured Myron, raising his cup, is a mask. I pray you all remember what lies beneath. Chapter 16. Masks beneath the table. The night of the feast revealed its first wound. A letter, intercepted by the veiled hands, marked with the seal of a forgotten house, Vaithrin. It spoke of a southern claim to the banner of freedom, believed lost after the second season's wars. In the kitchens, servants whispered that House Vaithrin had sworn fealty not to Veltharn, not to Valon, but to an unseen benefactor. In the corridors, lovers traded secrets, and one, noble, Lord Drakmor of the Crucible-born, vanished before dawn. Too many banners, said Evelyn to her handmaiden. Too many oaths. They will tangle until they strangle us. Chapter 17. Threads in the chapel Septon. Meryn gathered his invisible flock once more, now numbering over 100, from merchants to bastards of noble blood. They listened as he spoke of a thread-bearer, a destined figure who would pull the broken lands together. Some believed it was Thalios, others whispered Evelyn's name. The Septon fed neither rumor nor denial. He only handed out silver-threaded talismans, symbols of faith, or keys to control. The gods weave in silence, he intoned. Only men scream when they are tied. Chapter 18. The dagger of Erindor at dawn. A veiled hand assassin slipped past the molten gates of Veldharn. His mission, to capture Serathor, heir of the Phoenix line. But the boy was gone, spirited away to the volcanic terraces under the protection of Ember Matron's guard. The assassin left behind not his blade, but a message etched into obsidian. Your heir carries a death the ruby web will soon collect. Evangeline burned the message and summoned her council. The first cracks in the truce with Erindor were now visible and widening. Chapter 19. A council in ash and salt. A joint council between House Veltharn and House Velon was called a tide-locked hole. Fire met tide, banners snapped in the mist winds. Soldiers eyed each other like wolves divided by a low wall. Meryn stood at the edge of the council, silent, observing. Thaleo spoke boldly. The south stirs. The Ruby Prince plays with knives in our shadows. If we do not bind ourselves now, we will drown, whether in ash or salt. Evangeline remained measured, her fingers on the hilt of her flame-channeling dagger. Binds break as often as they hold. Chapter 20. The first fracture. The episode closes with a sudden night assault on a Veltharn supply caravan near the Obsidian Crossing. Its attackers bore no single banner, some crimson, some salt white, others marked with a silver thread. Rumors swept the charred spires. The weaver's faith had gone from whisper to blade. The noble houses had been warned, but none agreed who now pulled the strings. The final scene, Septon Meryn at a cliff's edge, watching the phoenix embers on the horizon, whispering, "The loom is churning. Let them bleed their colors into the cloth." Chapter 21. The Ember Veil. The dawn over Aether Zar restored did not come quietly. It bled across the volcanic terraces in streaks of embered light, painting the obsidian walls in hues of ash red and fading gold. The great market beneath the Phoenix Gates was already alive with rumor. Merchants whispered of caravans cut down in the night, of assassins' trails vanishing into the black sand, of silver-threaded tokens found nailed to door frames as omens. Inside the high hall, Evangeline Veldharn paced along the floor of inlaid fireglass, her bare feet tracing ancient sigils carved by the founders. Her council waited, the Flame Warden, the Red Alchemist, and Serathor's tutor, a man grown thin from both fasting and fear. "The gods burn our patience as if it were oil," she muttered, breaking the night's silence. "And still, the south sends shadows, and the sea sends whispers." From the open balcony came the scent of rain, carried on volcanic wind, rare, untrustworthy rain that sizzled on stone. Thalios Velon emerged from the mist, his tide-etched armor gleaming faintly with the salt of his homeland. He bowed with the fluid grace of a man born half to land, half to tide. "Your roads are unsafe, your markets trembling," he said quietly. "Our fleets feel the same claws. House Velon will not watch the threads knot around your throat and call it diplomacy." Their eyes met, two rulers tied by an unspoken romance, one kindled in the ashes of war, the other tested in the slow rod of peace. The court turned away discreetly, for they knew that this was not merely politics. It was the dangerous intimacy of two houses trying to fuse fire with water. Later that night, Evangeline wandered alone to the lava gardens. Between the glow of embervine and the hiss of molten terraces, a voice called, not from the air, but from the flame itself. Serathor's faint, childish laugh, carried upon the heat. "Mother, the fire listens now." It told me where the threads led. She froze. The flame rose in the shape of a half-formed phoenix, and in its heart a whisper that chilled her despite the heat. "The thread-bearer comes. His song will bind the ashes or burn them to glass, and then silence. Only the soft fall of volcanic ash, like black snow." Chapter 22. The Convocation of Threads. 3 weeks later, the Convocation of Threads was called in Tidelocket Hall, a meeting that had not occurred since the days before the Anahuas Rebellion. Lords from the charted spires, the Deepwater Coast, and emissaries from the Wind Bastion gathered under one roof, a roof that smelled of salt rot and smoked coral. Septon Marine arrived hooded, carrying no sigil but the 7-pointed staff etched with his private runes. His invisible flock grew bolder now. Merchants wore silver thread bracelets openly, and minor vassals placed their faith in the myth of the thread-bearer, believing he would return to stitch the world's wounds. The hall filled with heated voices. "You bring this song to our shores, Septon," snarled Lord Cairn of House Valon. "A song can become a banner, and a banner becomes war." "Faith is not a banner," Merrin replied, calm as winter rain. "It is the wind that moves banners when kings are too heavy to lift them." Evangeline watched him with the cold poise of a volcano before eruption. Thalios beside her, one hand resting on the carved chair, the other hidden, where a letter from his spies warned that Oriana's agents had entered the Valen ports disguised as salt priests. And then the revelation, a map unrolled, showing not borders but empty spaces claimed by no house, where silver thread marks glimmered faintly. The Weaver's cult had begun to settle, not as raiders, but as founders, planting bastions, shrines, and hunting grounds of faith. The convocation devolved into chaos. Blades were half drawn. Merrin raised his staff and the hall fell silent, for the staff's shadow split into 3 upon the floor. "You fight over names," he said, his voice now strangely doubled, as if another spoke behind his tongue. "But the name you should fear is sung in the east, carried by a man with hair like black water and eyes like cold sapphire. Viserion marches, and when he comes, your oaths will be threads he chooses to weave or cut." Situation ends with the storm outside breaking, rain and ash mingling on the coral steps, a flock of ink ravens scattering into the wind. Chapter 23. The unveiling of the hidden chapel. The evening mist settled over the bastion's outer walls, turning the torches along the ramparts into wavering golden eyes. Within the council hall, the Septon known as Elric of the Whispering Vale sat before a gathering of merchants, minor lords, and 2 knights of the royal guard. His voice was calm, but carried an undeniable edge of command, like a blade wrapped in velvet. "Faith is not built by sermons," he said, his pale fingers resting on the ancient text bound in cracked moon leather. "It is built by oaths, sealed not by words, but by action." A hush fell over the chamber as the Septon revealed a map inked with lunar dyes, a network of hidden shrines scattered beneath the very cities the crown claimed to govern. These were not places of open worship, but sanctuaries whispered of only in the deepest corridors. the chapels of the Vale. Among the audience, Lady Isolde Valmar, a recent widow with lands along the eastern tide, shifted uncomfortably. Her mourning veil was dark, but her eyes gleamed with curiosity and something else, defiance. "Why show us this now?" she asked, when the realm finally breathed in uneasy peace. Elaric's reply was slow, deliberate. "Because peace, my lady, is but the silence before the root breaks the stone." Outside, hunters returned from the newly claimed forest territory, stags upon their shoulders, their boots caked with black loam from the reclaimed hunting grounds. These were the lands of potential, new trade, new industries, new wealth. Yet beneath them, the chapels were stirring, drawing believers who spoke of a coming dawn of unseen gods. That night, as the bastion bells marked the 11th hour, Lady Isolde received a sealed missive beneath her door. A single line of script. "The chapel opens where the moon bleeds." Chapter 24. Bonds at the Ember Feast. 3 nights later, the halls of Hallowmere Bastion were alight with the glow of the Ember Feast, a celebration meant to bind the new company of settlers, merchants, and defenders in shared revelry. The banners of the crown hung alongside the sigils of the newly allied houses, Fox, Raven, and Tideknot entwined. Lord Kedrick Halvern, master of the hunting grounds, presided over the event, his mood lifted by the arrival of his betrothed, Mirella Thane, a healer from the southern courts. Their romance had become the whisper of the markets, a match between a scarred Lord of the Wilds and a woman whose touch was said to draw the fever from any wound. Dancers in fox masks twirled to the beat of ashwood drums. Traders toasted with spiced berry wine. Even the Septon Elaric movered among the guests, speaking softly to soldiers and merchants alike, planting his threads of faith within the laughter. Yet the night bore undertones, darker than the music. At the edge of the hall, Sir Valen Rowe, a blade sworn to House Veltarn, watched as a courier delivered the message, wrapped in blood-red ribbon to Kedrick's second-in-command. The courier disappeared into the crowd before his name could be caught. Later, by the fire pits in the courtyard, Mirella whispered to Kedrick, "Do you feel it too? This joy, it is rehearsed. This peace, it is brittle, like the frost before a thaw that floods the valleys." He placed a scarred hand upon hers, and for the first time that night his voice softened. "Then let us hold what warmth we can, before the valley drowns." Their wedding, now only weeks away, would become the symbol of this fragile alliance, if it ever came to pass. Chapter 25. The Ashen Pledge. The dawn that followed the Ember Feast was not golden, but grey. Smoke coiled over the hills from the east, not the smoke of war, but of a rallying host. Messengers poured into the bastion's gates. Banners of minor vassals had been seen gathering near the low marshes, and their loyalty was uncertain. Among them were names Kedrick had hunted beside, shared wine with, even sworn truce with during the Ashen Peace. In the great hall, the council convened. Septon Elaric's voice carried again, now sharper. "This is the first loosening of the weave. Ignore it, and the thread will unravel." The debate turned heated. Some lords urged to march at once, to crush the vassal gatherings before they could take root. Others, including Lady Isolde, counseled patience, arguing that too swift a sword would drive the realm into splintered rebellion. By dusk, Kedrick stood alone upon the high balcony, looking toward the east, where the marshes lay. Mirella joined him, wrapping her cloak about both their shoulders. "Would you ride to them?" she asked. He did not answer at first. His eyes traced the horizon, where stormbirds wheeled like black arrows. "I would ride," he said finally, "but not to command them. To ask them why their oaths, days of ash." That night, a raven arrived bearing the signet of a long-forgotten banner, the serpent in iron, a sigil not seen since the days of the first siege. And with it came a single phrase: "The ashen pledge is broken. The weave must be rewoven." Chapter 26. The Bells of Hollow Sanctum. The night was windless, and the star above the bastion's new courts burned like cold eyes. The celebrations of the recent wedding still lingered in the air like sweet incense, half-remembered songs and spilled wine on marble steps. But in the deepest vaults, beneath a reclaimed citadel, the bells of the hollow sanctum began to toll. No wind touched them, no hand drew their rope. They rang because something woke. Aldrich stood upon the western balcony, the scent of rain and forge fire mingling in his cloak. His fingers traced the railing, still warm from the day's sun. He should have felt triumph, new lands claimed, a treaty forged, alliances sealed in both blood and feast. But all he felt was the itch of prophecy gnawing at his bones. From the distant hills, torches moved like serpents in the dark. Scouts, merchants, perhaps spies. It no longer mattered which. The line between ally and enemy had blurred long ago. In the garden below, the newly arrived Septon knelt among the whispering yew trees, his hands clutching the sigil of his veiled god. Around him, shadows gathered, men and women cloaked in grey linen, faces hidden, murmuring prayers in a language long thought dead. They were called the Veilborn, and their faith promised an ending before the dawn. From the southern gates, the scent of the sea carried news. House Valon's fleet had dropped anchor, but none had come ashore. Their envoys waited, silent as the tides, demanding an audience that would never come at daylight. Something in the night had shifted, and their old powers knew it. Inside the council hall, Oriana's name returned to the lips of fearful servants, whispers of her ruby sigil etched upon the glass of abandoned chambers, her voice echoing through locked doors. Some claimed to have seen her reflection in the moonlit pools, though she had been thought dead for years. The bells tolled again. The hollow sanctum did not ring for the living. It rang for what crossed thresholds. A messenger, pale as salt, fell to his knees before Aldrich. "My lord, the eastern bastion is gone. Not fallen, gone." As if the ground opened and swallowed it. And then, from the misted horizon, a figure on the manticore's back approached. Dark-haired, scarred by ancient steel, blue eyes like fractured ice. Viserion had returned, carrying a banner no one remembered swearing to, but all instinctively feared. His arrival was no siege, no war cry, only the promise of a reckoning whispered by the old songs. And as the bells rang a third time, the stars above the bastion blinked out, one by one. The episode ends with the gates swinging open on their own.